What's up, y'all? This is Jesse Warden back again to dive more into Require.js. Today we're going to go over the actual creation of a project that uses Require.js versus just showing you a bunch of example projects. So I know I went over the basics, and we're still going to cover the basics, but I wanted to show actually coding and show how you can actually use it and show the dependencies that Require will do for you, as well as some of the problems you run into and things like that, and basically the workflow of trying to get that bloody set of libs set up. So we're going to create a new project from scratch. I'm going to use Sublime here to go over everything, although I highly recommend you check out the IntelliJ 12. I've got 11 on this machine. On another, I've tried it. It looks a lot like Sublime. It's got TypeScript support and all kinds of other awesome hotness for refactoring and everything else. But for creating things, I like to use Sublime. For fixing things and inheriting projects, I like to use IntelliJ. So that's the workflow, okay? So here we go. We're going to create a new project folder in my 20 billion packages. So we'll call this Require.js Basics v2. Go clone a repo, copy pasta, browse to disox, choose clone. Oh my gosh, it didn't create a DS store. Life is good, ladies and gentlemen. All right. So the first way to make sure things work is to copy from a project that you know works. So we're going to do that. We're going to copy from a project I currently have going that has handlebars and everything already set up. So I'm going to go to the P90X dashboard because I know that that actually has a lot of stuff that's already hooked up. And I will copy that into the Require.js basic example project folder. Okay, we'll open up Sublime to that directory. All right, so let's modify this to be, instead of the dashboard, we'll call this Require.js basic example 2. And we don't need styles. We don't need, yeah, we do need this. We always need this. Don't need this for now. Don't worry about config. No one cares. Don't need all this jazz. We just want our good old logger so we can actually debug stuff. And for those of you on IE, you are not left out. Yo, Holmes. It's Holmes, Jesse, with an L. If you're going to do it right. Roger that. All right, we'll kill the test runner. Kill the CSS folder. Yes, delete. Kill the com folder. Yes, delete. Kill the loc. Oh wait, don't kill the locale. Delete files. All right, we got some libs. We may use them all. Who knows? But we know that they're all set up and they're ready to go. Okay. Let's take a look at this Require package here before we leave. Let's set it up with the libs. See, we got some Jquery action. We got some JSON2 action. We got some underscore backbone event bus. Yeah, I'll get to event bus in a minute. We'll go back to that later. All right, so we've got a basic thing. Don't even care about Optimize right now. And we got handlebars and everything's set up. Let's basically show a simple set of VOs that are drawn on the screen using Jquery, iterating over the data in a base class, okay? So we're going to create a simple selector here. Call it simple selector. It's if you're familiar with Jungle or drum and bass, this should be English. If it's not, just trust me, it is a word and a very popular noun spoken by Jamaicans worldwide. All right, so let's create our package path. So what is a package path? Well, if you're familiar with Java or Lua, or basically every language except for JavaScript, they have something called packages. And what these are folders to organize your code. It's usually using the reverse domain, also known as your domain backwards. So for example, GitHub backwards would be com.github. My website would be com.jessewarden. So I'm going to use that. So I'm going to say a new file. Just kidding. I'm going to say a new folder called Kizam, with a new folder within that called Jesse Warden, with a new folder inside of that called, what are we doing? Require Basics 2. V2. There we go. V2. Cool. So that's our package path. Com, Jesse Warden, Require Basics V2. We'll make a new folder called VO. VO stands for value object, also known as a data transfer object with meaningful data. If you don't know what these patterns are, don't worry about it. You're still made of awesome. So we're going to make a new file. We're going to make our new VO. So we're going to use the module pattern now. I know before I wasn't. I'll get to the module pattern in a minute. But basically what this means is that anything within this function that's defined will not be on the global object. The global object is also known as window. And people do crazy things like call this and all kinds of craziness. Depends on if you're using CoffeeScript or not. But don't worry about that. So we're going to save this as person vo.js, okay? Then within this guy, we're going to define it like that, okay? So that's a function block. Now, usually people in Java do this similar too. They'll have their package and then they'll like not indent their class. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to make sure define is on this instead of going over here. It's just a way I do it because you tend to tab a lot, especially if your tabs are 4 spaces like mine are. So I'm going to go define, no classes, okay? I don't have any dependencies. This is a value object that doesn't need anything. Okay. And I forgot a parenthesis. There we go. Okay. So here is our closure class. We're going to call it a person VO, and it equals a function, also known as a constructor, person VO. This returns an object, a unique instance. So every time anybody and their mom uses person VO, this will be a brand new unique function that returns. When they go new, that function or constructor function will return a brand new unique object. Make sense? Cool. All right. So we'll say first name with a default value of null, last name with a default value of null, and let's give it a method called get pretty name. Okay, and that, if I learn how to type, will respond with, not semicolon, we'll respond with a return last name, comma, first name. Perfect. Okay. Last thing, let's give it some constructor parameters such as first and last. And we'll say this equals first and this equals last. There we go. Now we can actually instantiate our person VOs with some values. You'll notice that people such as Google do not like you doing work in your constructor. I am doing so. Boo-hoo. You can sue me. All right, so we got a person VO. Let's test that mofo. So we'll go up here and let's create a, we can test it right here. Why not? Go to require. Notice again, my person VO is define, okay? And my class is require. They actually utilize the things that you've defined. So what am I requiring? I'm requiring com, because our root is JS, right? This file is running from JS. It doesn't have to, but we're going to say our base URL is this folder, so we know what folder we're actually in. For this case, since the index.html is there, is right next to the JS folder, you'll see that the base URL is JS, or the folder here. To be explicit, I'll go like this, right? So, dude, the folder that is right here called JS, right? That's what / means. It means right here. Right here. Right now. Right here. All right, so let's require com dot what? Jesse Warden using a slash require basics v2 require slash vo slash person vo. Notice I don't do .js, I just say person vo. Require smart enough to know that you mean JS. Okay. Second parameter is the function that is called when your classes are loaded and ready to go. That could be one file, that could be the files that he requires, whatever, right? That's why they call it an asynchronous module loader, okay? So we're going to take our person VO, and because everything within here is not going to be in the global object, because we defined using the module pattern, we're going to put it in our constructor so the internals of this function can actually access it. So since there's no most people who define classes in JavaScript will define a class like this.object and it'll be on window. So this, if I go, let's say right here, go var cal equals, I don't know, 2. it's the same thing as going window.cow equals 2, right? So anybody and their mom who accesses the variable cow without this or anything else will have access to that, right? In this case, since person is defined in the module pattern, it's nowhere to be found. The only way is to actually load it, and then the first class that's loaded is the exact same order that these come in, okay? So I'm going to say test equals new person VO, Jesse Warden, that's me, logger.test. Cool thing about log for JavaScript, if you do a comma, it'll actually put this as a separate log versus doing a string concatenation like this. So you can still inspect the object in most debuggers such as Safari and Chrome. Firefox, not so much. Firefox, they have Firebug, but Firebug is starting to show its age, which is pretty interesting considering it's, you know, JavaScript's slow development. So let's run this mofo. Now you'll notice that both Safari and Firefox on my machine have configurations which you can find on Stack Overflow that allow them to read and write local files. As a Flash developer, this seems like an asinine thing to do. However, web developers are obsessed with local servers and running things with servers and and Ruby people and Python people. So for them, they're like, that's not, why would you ever want to read a local file? Oh, I don't know, maybe because it's simple and easy to do. So mine don't have security things. Chrome on a Mac and a PC, you have to launch with security things to do what I'm doing right now, and that is open and run a local file. You'll notice it's local by this thing right here. See how it says file : / versus HTTP. So if you don't want to use a web server, you just want to do simple stuff, this is what you do. I'll link to the in the YouTube comments where you can learn how to do this so you don't get security errors. Okay, so most of the time, if you have errors right inside the code somewhere else, Require, bless his heart, is not good at telling you exactly where it is. It's not really his fault. A lot of it has to do with browser exception handling. Doesn't always tell you exactly where the error occurred. Safari is one of the best as of right now. Chrome someday may get better, but Safari is really good at identifying exceptions. A little bit better in location than Chrome. The errors are different, but it's sometimes better, okay? So that's why I use it a lot. So what it's having a problem with is on line 60, it can't find the person VO. So the one way you do to verify the class actually worked is you want to just log the actual class itself. Did person VO even launch? So what we do is when we open Safari, we make sure develop. Now if you don't see develop, you just go to preferences in Safari, you go to, I think it's the advanced, and you'll see at the very bottom say show developer menu toolbar. If you don't see it, reboot Safari after you click this. You should be good to go. Once you see this, then you can disable cache. All right, so just to verify, we have our JS libs and our JS libs, right? So we know that these are legit. Usually if these weren't, they would actually be mixed in with some of these errors, but we know those are good. So we're going to actually test if this is good. So once you have your develop toolbar, you can say disables cache. You can refresh to your heart's content. In Chrome, you actually have to keep this stupid window open or it'll like not cache. It's so frustrating. So here we go. We're going to refresh. Apple R is what I was hit. Cool. It's undefined. So that means somewhere in this particular class it didn't like it. Okay? So let's go fix or look at the class and figure out what we did wrong. So again, these errors, unhelpful. It doesn't tell you exactly what's wrong. Those of you who come from compilers that, you know, actually help you, you're SOL. You're SOL. You're going to have to deal with it. You're going to have to be tough and hard like all JavaScript developers. So let's take a look at person VO. He looks legit. Now, one thing that's very valuable to debug is sometimes that your code, you might forget syntax or something else. It helps to compare to other projects that you know for a fact work. And once they've worked, you've actually checked into GitHub. So you know anytime you ever have a problem, you can refer to them, right? So let's take a look. There we go. All right, so we've got a function. Get rid of this, get rid of this. Okay. Yep, function. Got her defined. Looks good. Got our callback function in there. At the very bottom, it's got the bracket, and then the bracket. Yeah, looks good. I think the only thing left is the actual call, the actual module. So let's try that. Yeah, there we go. Forgot to call the module, right? So, again, the module pattern is a function. Within the function, everything is a local variable, right? But you actually have to invoke the function. Once you invoke the function, everything you do in here is basically a local variable, or var. It means it dies at the end of the function. It doesn't exist in global scope unless you explicitly state window dot blah blah blah. And even window doesn't necessarily work unless you actually pass it in, which is helpful for things like Phantom.js and Zombie.js when you're going to test your code without an actual browser, right? Or you're going in Node or other environments where JavaScript runs and it doesn't actually have things like global and document, things like that, and you can mock them. So again, this is the proper way to do module coding, and in a future video I'll explain JavaScript classes and OOP and the various ways you do it. But just know it's a best practice to keep your defines inside functions. I know you saw other code it doesn't. I'm trying to keep it basic, but now you know. No one's half the battle, G.I. Joe, Yo, Joe. So now that we know this is legit, and we can see our class or constructor function here, we'll uncomment this, run it again. There you go. Now, again, remember how I said comma? If you do a comma, you can actually see the object, so we can actually see our first name, last name, and our functions and things like that, right? Method names. Pretty cool, right? Now, we're going to create some primitive list control, and this primitive list control will utilize Jquery to actually draw a series of persons on the screen. So we'll feed in a data provider or an array or a collection, whatever you want to call it, and this will class will know how to build things. So we're going to make a new package called, or folder, same thing, called views, and we'll make a new class and we'll copy pasta just so we don't get things wrong, and we'll call this guy person list.js, okay? And we'll say person list. I'm going to make this one break intentionally so you can see how challenging it is to debug require, but at the same token some tricks you can utilize to hopefully what's the word I'm looking for? Find the most common reasons why something would fail. Generally, it's one particular module screws up a whole bunch, so I'll do my best to help you fix that. All right, so person list, we're not going to put anything in the constructor. It's a view. I really dislike putting things in constructor for view because it makes them really hard to test in isolation and test harnesses. Test harnesses are kind of like unit tests, except they're for views. So in this case, we're going to have a list that has some form of collection, okay? So we're going to say collection. Yeah, let's just say person list. How about that? It's a little more explicit. Well, that's the name of the view. How about let's say person array. There we go. Okay, get more explicit than that. Null. And then we'll say render to follow the whole backbone blah 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 render, okay? And to make things a little more safer, we'll say let's give it a couple of elements. So we use the whole backbone methodology of set element. Say elements would be whatever div or span or tag that this mofo is drawn into, okay? So we'll say this dot L equals L, comma, after the bracket, so we have another function. Render has a couple things that needs to be done. So the most common thing people will do, will let this thing draw, and if it fails, then they'll just deal with the exceptions, and they assume that they'll later debug it or whatever else. They don't help themselves in the future, and I'll show you what that means. So first, let's grab ourselves some Jquery, so we can do some hot Jquery action, and we'll make it a $sign because that's what everyone uses for Jquery. And we'll snag our L, so we'll go Jquery this dot L. So this gives us our element, or in this case, our div. So if the I'm going to assume it's a selector for now, okay? And we'll say take the HTML from this particular div and draw your list HTML that we're going to generate. What is list HTML? List HTML is a big old string. It's a big old string that has divs in it and stuff like that to draw people, okay? So what kind of HTML are we rendering in a list? Well, most list HTML starts with a, can you guess? An ordered list. Nah, we're going to do unordered for now. Just kidding. We're going to do ordered list, and I'll tell you why. Because we want to see the actual indices of the array to help for easier debugging, okay? So that's that. Now, we're going to get a var len, also known as length, for our this.person array dot length. Now, why do we do var len instead of right here? Why do we do that versus person.length? It's just a simple optimization that you can do so that you don't have to calculate the array's length inside of the loop every single time. Seems benign, but it actually can make a huge difference when you have a significant amount of GUI controls drawn in an application. Helps your app scale. Premature optimization is in fact the root of all evil. However, simple things like this go a long way, and after a while they become habit. You don't even think about it. So trust me, it's a good thing. Okay. So index, you can make a for loop, and this guy is going to take the person VO out of the this.person array with the index. Okay, he's going to take the person VO and he's going to actually utilize that data and draw it as a list item. So let's do that right now. We're going to add a list item, and we're going to say person VO get pretty name. And we'll do a new line just in case it's actually easier to read. Okay. Now, when this guy's done loading, we're going to close it with a in tag, and we're going to shove this in tag inside here. Now, a couple problems with this function. Number one, the burden of order of operations is on the consumer, aka the developer using this class. Now, I know it's just me, but on a large man team consisting of 2 to many developers, they have to know that they have to set the element first and the array before they call render. If they call render, the thing will explode. If they call render or bind it to some other property, it will also explode. So there's some simple things you can do to make this class easier to debug. Keep in mind that this class is part of a larger system, okay? So if this explodes, you've seen what happens. Sometimes it gives you good errors and require, sometimes not. So if it does explode, you want it to be helpful in what went wrong. And you do that by doing intentional errors. Now, I have a blog post from a long time ago that's on Flash, but it replies just as well to JavaScript called Don't Make Grenades. And I encourage you to check it out. It's basically an error handling action tree. What it means is, and I basically read a Java article that already solved these things, but it talks about how you want to make errors opt-in. The only errors that you actually want to have happen during development are those that you want to have happen and you need to know about. So for example, if the server is sending strange data, like you want to know that in a dev cycle, not when you go to production, right? However, at the end of the day, you don't want users to see useless error messages that don't do anything, nor have them in situations which they can't recover from, right? So you want to make as much as possible throws. You don't want to throw. What you want to do is dispatch events or things like that that don't make the browser print out errors. So such as throws, such as null pointer exceptions, such as type errors. You actually want to do a logger.log error so that you can see it and see what happened. And if a user has a problem, they actually have a chance to tell you what went wrong, right? Let me show you an example of what I mean when you actually run this with absolutely no intentional error handling and the burden of the developer actually running it, okay? So we're going to run and render this list with no data or anything else. So basically say this, okay? Here's what happens. Type error null is not an object evaluating length. Okay, this is somewhat helpful. And this is somewhat helpful as well, right? No, seeing this, but let's see what happens when we run it in Firefox. Now notice in Firefox it says person array is null, right? Which is a little bit more helpful for Firebug. And it tells you the same line that Safari says. But again, completely different error message. One says person.array length is null, and this says person array is null. Like it actually is a little more explicit. And you can actually see the stack trace within there, okay? Safari will at least attempt to take you to that file when you click on the link. It'll take you to the exact where the type error occurred. For example, if I set the breakpoint, hit run, I can then debug the code and blah, 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 and guess like, okay, person array is probably null. If I actually go to the scope, look at person, this dot person array. Yep, it is in fact null. That's why this is failing, because it's a null pointer exception. Okay, or you could launch it in Chrome, which I'll do. You notice in Chrome, once I've launched it without disable web security, it says a type error cannot read property length of null. Completely different exception, but at least it's in the same length, right? So something to do with length, but it has nothing to do with length. It has to do with a null pointer exception that the object I'm setting length on or trying to query length on is null. It's a null pointer. Run your console and see what's wrong. So if I actually run this particular thing, then hit refresh, I can then go to my console. So we'll say this person array See, and it does a type int for me, but it's null. So actually, you know, it's aware of it. It's null. Okay. So that's helpful. But again, I had to go through all this debugging, got different, you know, exceptions in different browsers. So there's a little different, you know, ways you could do it. Let's be proactive, shall we? We'll go if this dot L equals null. We'll say throw new error. Cool. So a little bit more helpful. Tells you what it is, and we'll even return and abort the stack. So we'll refresh. Now we can see our uncut error. The element is null, thus we cannot draw. Right? A lot more helpful. However, it still effectively breaks our app. The problem with doing throw, especially in a browser environment, is that every browser handles throw differently. Some will abandon the entire stack. Some will keep going. So you never really know what could actually happen. So it's better to actually log. So now the problem with this is that if you hand this off to somebody else, like another developer, cool. They will know that the burden is on them to figure out the order of operations to do this, right? It might be better to say this. See? So they know what went wrong, but their whole app didn't explode, and they can still test this if they don't have time to get this from the server or whatever else, right? So this is just something simple you can do to A, help another developer, including yourself, if you forgot, when this class hasn't been touched for 6 months. And B, the user doesn't get punished by an error in some random place that they don't care about because they're not developing their app. They're using your bloody app, right? If this .person array is null, dude, why are we even doing this, right? Logger.error. Thus, we cannot draw. A nice English error that you should be able to, within seconds, be able to read and understand the problem and identify where it is. If you cannot write things like this, you need to think about how to make your code a little bit easier to debug. So let's say person list render, right? So I know what function it is and what the problem is in English. Why are English things important? Sometimes project managers or QA people will read this stuff. If you can get them to give you this, sometimes they can do some work for you to figure out the problem rather than assigning you the JIRA or the bug. So these kind of things, believe it or not, are an investment in the long run. Cool. So our class won't even attempt to draw if neither of these situations is met. It'll abort and it'll at least tell us what went wrong instead of exploding in a mess, right? So you can opt into this error. You don't have to open this thing. You can just run your app and test something else, right? And these things will silently fail. And that's great. If they do fail, we know why. We can opt in and figure it out. Most browsers have some way to see the errors in the bottom right and what went wrong, okay? So now that we have a person VO capable of drawing a set of person array, let's instantiate this guy and test him out. Now you'll notice I get a series of test harnesses. These are not unit tests. These are just simple things to test my classes. Unfortunately, these become very hard to maintain, so I recommend you either use a more formalized unit testing framework or a unit testing test harness framework for your views. Me, I'm just showing it for you guys. Hey, learn how to type. Press basic 2, views, what was it? Person list? Is that what it was? Right. Person list. Person list. All right. So just to verify our person list works. Refresh. Person list looks legit. Sounds great. Whoa, hey, don't do that. That's wrong, yo. You'll be breaking my code up in this mug. Just to be explicit, let's call this a view. Verify the instance was created and everyone's happy. Our view looks good. Has our methods. Funky Comedina. Next up, let's try to call render. Make sure I don't explode things. Cool, man. See, you can see the error. Person list render our element is null. We actually know where the error is. Here's my problem, though. It is not in line 1930 of uncompressed log for job, blah, blah, blah. That's one thing that's so frustrating about browsers. Chrome will do the same thing. It's like, no, actually the problem was inside of a person list class. But hey, thanks anyway, browser. And I know, WebKit has brought a lot to the world, but like this is pathetic. Like they wonder why, programmers come to JavaScript go, WTF, here's why. Like that's not where the problem is. That's why this thing goes a long way, because it's like, well, look, if you're going to tell me the wrong class, at least I know for a fact that this class is here. Taking a step back, a lot of you are like, Jesse, what does this have to do with require.js? It has everything to do with require.js. When you're dealing with multiple files and multiple modules, sometimes on a multi-person team, you don't want to be hunting down errors. Require, unfortunately, is built upon JavaScript and the engines that power it, so therefore it can't tell you exactly where the error occurred. You do not want to be hunting errors. When you're dealing with multiple files across a large swath of a project, you want to know exactly where those errors are quickly and what method, so you don't have to think, okay? Give this guy an actual element. So we'll say set element. Thanks for the code hint there, Sublime. So we'll say the element is the simple selector. Whoa. There we go. Notice the pound sign. So we use the jQuery syntax of selector. Okay. Run it again. And our person array is empty. So we need to make some data. We're going to make some fake data so this can run, also known as a fixture. So we'll call out person list is an array, and we'll say person list push Jesse Warden. Just kidding. New person VO, and to use it, gotta import it or require it, whatever language you want to use. I like to use bad language because I'm a bad person. Person VO. Say new person VO. Jesse Warden. Learn how to type, Mr. Warden. Then we'll copy pasta this about 3 times. Say Brandy Fortune. If you don't know, she's a hottie mohottie. Wade Wilson. Alrighty. Now that we have our person list, let's set our data provider. I can't even remember the method name because I'm a crackhead. I didn't make it. Okay, so this is the property, huh? Person list equals person list. There we go. Cool. Now, can't find person VO. I forgot to import it because I'm a crackhead. Person VO. There we go. Okay, person array is empty. Good. It's not person array, it's person array, not list. Now notice, by setting the wrong value, it actually told us exactly what was wrong. See how that works? That's why these kind of things are helpful. It tells you what's wrong. It's proactive. Doesn't take a lot of time. Good stuff. Actually, let's call this person array just so we don't confuse that with person list. Even though JavaScript is case sensitive, we don't want to exacerbate the debugging problems. There we go. Cool. Can't find last name. Fantastic. All right. So let's go into here and use this because I didn't use this because I'm a crackhead. Refresh. There we go. Cool. So we have a simple list control or list view that utilizes this and utilizes require to do its work. So he requires jQuery. Notice he doesn't necessarily require person VO, although he can know how to work with instances of person VO. He doesn't actually have to know about it because by then it's already instantiated. It's an instance of the object and it's in here. However, our root does have to do it. So again, that's the basics of require, utilizing a person VO and a person list inside a single file. Requires both. It'll load the person VO and then the person list. Once those are both loaded, then you can actually use them. This function will not run until both of these files are loaded. If, for whatever reason inside of person list, you'll notice we have to use jQuery. Require will make sure that it loads jQuery first, then loads person VO and person list, then runs our function, right? So that's what's all nice about it, okay? Cool. Again, my name is Jesse Warden. My Twitter handle is JesterXL. I'm on Google+. You can send me an email at jesse@jessewarden.com, JesterXL, whatever. I'll be more than happy to help you. My company, Web App Solution, we do JavaScript apps, Flex apps, mobile apps, all kinds of cool stuff. And that's it. If you got any questions, let me know. Thanks for your time.